Okay, everyone, so this is Justice Jennifer Brunner. She is the lone Democratic justice on our Ohio Supreme Court.
I got cracked up when I saw that picture. That's from 2014.
You don't look at that good.
And my niece is the photographer, and she showed up to my house on a Sunday morning, and I had just rolled out of bed, and she looked at me and she said, do we need to reschedule? I said, no, I can fix myself up. Don't worry, Abby. So anyways, when this ended up on a billboard, she said, you mean my photos going on a billboard? And at that point in time, my granddaughter was maybe 3 years old. And so I took her to where the billboard was. I said, look, who's that, Maddie? Me, Mom. So now she's 14. But anyways, I'm so glad that you all are willing to brave the cold to be out here today and to be informed early on about these races. So I have been around for a long time. I was first elected Common Pleas Court Judge in 2000 in Franklin County. And during that time, I started the Adult Felony Drug Court in 2004. So that has been in operation for almost 22 years. And it's doing very well. It was a very difficult thing to start in a county where I was. At the time when I was elected, I think I was the 5th Democrat on a court of 16 judges and the 5th woman on a court of 16 judges. And that court is now, I think, all but one Republican, or all but one Democrat. There's only one Republican left on that court, which kind of shows you how Franklin County changed from a very red county to a very blue county. And I remember the first time I campaigned in Cuyahoga County when I was running in 2006, 2005, and 6 for Secretary of State. The people in Cuyahoga County said, why aren't you putting Democrat on your literature? And I said, well, I'm from Franklin County. You don't really say if you're a Democrat. You know, things have changed. And I say these things because I'm now on a court of 7 justices. When I was elected, it made the court 3 Democrats and 4 Republicans. Oftentimes, the Chief Justice, Maureen O'Connor, was really more progressive at voting with the Democrats or dragging the Democrats along when it came to redistricting. When she left, I ran for Chief Justice, and so in between being elected to the Supreme Court in 2020, I was elected Secretary of State, and then later on to the 10th District Court of Appeals. But when I got to the Supreme Court and Maureen was leaving, she asked me, a Republican asked me if I would run for Chief Justice, which I did. And about 2 weeks after I announced my race for Chief Justice, or my candidacy for Chief Justice, the legislature changed the law and decided to put party label on the ballot for appeals court judges. Now, what had happened in 2020 was I had won. That put things perilously close for the Republicans not to be able to feel like they had control of the 3 branches of government. And at the same time, a majority of the judges of all the courts of appeals of the state were Democratic. So this was a very political move by the legislature. We didn't know how it was going to be, and I sadly in 2022 and again in 2024, we watched very good Democratic and Republican Court of Appeals judges either not run for re-election or be beat, some after serving for over 20 years, just because of that party label on the ballot. My colleagues, Mike Donnelly and Melody Stewart, who had been elected to the Ohio Supreme Court initially in 2018, even though no other Democrats were elected statewide, they were defeated handily. And so that left me as the lone Democratic justice on the Supreme Court. I didn't think this was right, and I figured that I was in the best position to be able to fight this. So on Election Day in 2023, I filed a federal lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of the party label on the ballot for judges because of free speech concerns. I mean, for instance, if you had a Republican judge who was on the Court of Appeals or running for the Court of Appeals who happened to be pro-choice, Democrats might assume that they were not pro-choice, or vice versa. It could be any number of issues, whether it was gun control, you know, the hot button issues. And judges are not permitted to really speak their minds on questions that could come before them, or they would have to recuse in hearing the case, and that's not doing their job. And the reason that you want judges to not have a party label on the ballot is you want to try to learn enough about them, about what their skills and outlook is as a judge, because you never want to walk into court when somebody already has the decision written. You want them to be able to listen objectively to both sides of the argument, to be well versed in the law, and to understand enough about the law that whatever they decide in the case is not results oriented, but looking to the future of the law and how it's going to be applied in other situations. I know oftentimes I will think about where we might be going in making our decision and realize, oh, this could be misconstrued if we say too much here. You know, that idea of judicial restraint. If we go out and gratuitously offer an opinion on something that's not really before us, that could be misapplied in some other case. And, you know, my colleagues are very, very strong in talking about we don't legislate from the bench. And what they mean by that is we're not going to make up a policy when the policy questions are within the purview, within the decisions of the legislature. Yet, when they want to get a particular result, they oftentimes do legislate from the bench. And oftentimes I am the only person who is dissenting, who is disagreeing with the majority opinion. I have no problem with that, because as I see the law fairly, there's more than one way to climb the mountain, and if they got there a certain way and I disagree with how they got there because of the ramifications it may create for ordinary people, I will try to show a different way to climb the mountain, and in the future, some other paid decision maker who is a judge or a justice may look at my reasoning and say, you know, that was the better way to go. And at that point in time, we'll have a little different nuance to the society, we'll have different people making the decision, and maybe I laid tracks for the future. And you know, there are times when I will say, sorry, I cannot go in this direction. And they will look at me and say, what are you gonna write? Because what happens sometimes is if I just write a straight up decision like, you know, disagreeing with a finding that nitrogen gas is not toxic when they're putting people to death with nitrogen in Alabama and using it as suggesting it as a backup for Ohio. And their reasoning is that, well, nitrogen is part of ambient air, so in and of itself it may not be toxic. And we don't want to, we're going to grab from the US Supreme Court idea of redundancy, that we cannot read this rule in this particular way because it would be redundant. I'm like, does your back hurt from bending around and twisting 4 different ways when you don't need to? I don't always say that, but there are times when I say, why do you want to do this? You know what you're going to look like? Because that's the other piece about the judiciary. You know, we don't have the purse like the legislature. We don't have the National Guard like the governor. All we have are our words. And our words are all that we have to allow and try to make sure that people trust in what we do. And the more they trust in what we do, whether it's like, especially it's that way with democracy too. Democracy and the judiciary are 2 of the strongest pillars to maintain a rule of law and a strong democracy. And if we use our words in the right way so that the law is clear and evident and it's fair, then people have more trust in our ability to make things right. I had always felt, as an attorney, and I'm never one of those attorneys who says, oh, you know, makes jokes about being an attorney, because I guess from the work I've done overseas in Serbia, Sri Lanka, Benin, remotely in Kazakhstan, and in Egypt, doing election observation, I understand what the rule of law means. The rule of law is not what you hear from Donald Trump and ICE about the strong rule of the law. I mean, God forbid. The rule of law is this concept where we believe in something greater than ourselves, that we realize if we all, and it works well, and we do things together in the right way, and we have people exercising that rule of law who we can trust, it is the way that we keep our democracy going. It is, when done well, something that keeps us safe, something that keeps things predictable, and something that is a springboard for that pursuit of happiness that we're going to celebrate 250 years of in this year, that's in our very Declaration of Independence. So, having seen countries that struggle with that rule of law, that have insane amounts of corruption, that I can remember my first trip to Serbia working with USAID was in 2012. Their unemployment rate was 25%. A man who was an air traffic controller had to also be a massage therapist on the side. And a reporter whose wife wanted to get a job at a public school had to pay the principal $3,000 in order to give his wife that job. And he regretted having to do it, but he said, at least I can publicize it. Or a woman who wanted to have a baby in a hospital with state-provided health insurance had to still pay her doctor 2,500 euro so he could put her in a room with 2 women instead of 6, and she would get well baby care for her baby. That is not the life that we want. And so, what I say to you is, you're here. There are a lot of people who couldn't be here because of the weather, but there are a lot of people who didn't care enough to be here. And the thing that we have to remember is that there's a reason that we fight. And even though we say maybe we'll sit this